Hi classmates, I am Jobsary Gold and today we are going to study the stem. Its external structure, primary tissues and regions, the secondary tissues, the internal structures in woody stem, the herbaceous monocot versus herbaceous dicot versus woody stem, and lastly, the specialized stem. First, what is stem? Stem are part of the shoot system of a plant. It may vary from range of length to millimeters or meters and also varies in diameter depending on the plant type. Stems are usually above ground, although the stems of some plants such as the potato grow underground. Stem may be herbaceous, which is soft or woody in nature. Their main function is to provide support to the plant, holding leaves, flowers, and buds. In some cases, stem also store food in the plant. A stem may be unbranched, like that palm tree, or it may be highly branched, like the magnolia tree. The stem of the plant connects the roots of the leaves, helping to transport, absorb water, and minerals to different parts of the plant. It also helps to transport the products of photosynthesis, namely the sugars, from the leaves to the rest of the plant. Stems, whether above or below ground, are characterized by the presence of nodes and internodes. Nodes are points of attachments for leaves, aerial roots, and flowers. The stem region between two nodes is called an internode. The stalk that extends from the stem to the base of a leaf is the petiole. An axillary bud is usually found in the axil, the area between the base of a leaf and the stem, where it can give rise to a branch or flower. The terminal bud grows at the tip of a shoot and causes the shoot to grow longer. The nodes, it is important for healing, structural support, and the biological process takes place. The internode are the blood vessels carrying the water, hormones, and food from node to node. And stem supports the leaves to conduct water and minerals to the leaves. The abscission layer, whereas transport water to the leaf, flower, or fruit and carry carbohydrates back to the tree. The petiole attaches the leaf blade to the stem and able to twist the leaf to face the sun. Leaves manufacture food, plants, which is turn ultimately nourish and sustain all land animals. The growing point that is a rounded cone-shaped tip of a growing axial organ of a plant. So this is a woody stem. Woody stem plants are plants with stems of wood, which contains lignin. Lignins are complex organic polymers that are very sturdy and rigid. Trees and some vines with woody stems are considered woody stem plants, not herbaceous plants. This diagram shows the layers of vascular tissues that make up a wood trunk or stem. The sapwood is xylem that is actively transporting, and the heartwood is xylem that is lignified, so is no longer active. Heartwood forms as the tree ages and the inner xylem cell lose the capacity to transmit water. Heartwood tends to be darker in color than sapwood because it is normally filled with various types of oils, dyes, and sugars. The primary function of heartwood is to provide adequate support to the tree. Young xylem or sapwood conducts sap, strengthens the stem, and to some extent serve as a storage reservoir to the food. The vascular cambium is responsible for increasing the diameter of stem and roots and forming woody tissues. The phloem carries food downward from the leaves to the roots. The barks provides many functions of trees. Barks also plays an essential role in transporting photosynthetic products in plant tissues. Barks is also crucial to the mechanics of the stem. Furthermore, bark is involved in the defense against herbivore, protects against fire, and provides insulation in cold conditions. Next is the primary tissues and regions. There are three types of primary tissues. The first one is the dermal tissues that covers and protects the plant and controls gas exchange and water absorption in roots. Dermal tissues of the stems and leaves is covered by a waxy cuticle that prevents evaporative water loss. Stomata are specialized pores that allows gas exchange through holes in the cuticle. The next one is the vascular tissues that are complex conducting tissues in higher different types of cells and elements. The two main components of vascular tissues are xylem and phloem. These tissues are responsible for transport of water and nutrient in the plants. The ground tissue is the third one, which arises from a ground tissue meristem and consists of three simple tissues: the parenchyma, the collenchyma, and the sclerenchyma. The cells of each simple tissues bear the same perspective tissue. The ground tissue of the vascular plant is responsible for storing the carbohydrates produced by the plant. Ground tissue comprises the majority of a young plant and lies between the vascular and dermal tissues. The secondary tissues. The secondary tissues are produced in woody plants. Secondary xylem and secondary phloem are produced from a cylinder of meristematic tissues within the woody stems and roots. The cylinder of meristematic tissue is the vascular cambium. The secondary xylem provides additional structural support and additional water conduction tissue in shrubs and trees. The secondary phloem replaces the primary phloem. Similarly, as the trunk of woody plant gets larger, the dermal tissue need to be expanded and replaced. New dermal tissue is produced by the cork cambium, which lies beneath the bark. The internal structure of woody stem. Woody stem plants are plants with stems of wood, which contains lignine. Lignines are complex organic polymers that are very sturdy and rigid. Trees and some vines with woody stems are considered woody stem plants, not herbaceous plant. So as you can see, the radial surface that transport of carbohydrates from the inner bark to the wood. The phloem ray that stores starch and help maintain a living connection between the cambium and phloem. The inner bark, which in older stems is living tissues, includes the innermost layer of the periderm. The outer bark, an older stem, includes the dead tissues on the surface of stem and the periderms that protect the plant from infection and disease. Right now, we will watch this video.
Here, I have a hard, woody stem that I found in my garden. This has been one of the branches that we cut off our trees. We know that the leaves need water to make their food, and we know that the stem carries the water which has been collected by the roots up to the leaves. This is done through tubes inside the woody stem. Can you see here the woody stem has got a hard covering? We call this bark, and the bark protects the tree or these tubes inside from the weather and from animals that like to take little bites of them. This protective layer, as we said, is called bark. In some plants, the tubes inside are arranged in rings. Look at this picture, and you can see that here. Every year, the plant adds another ring to the stem, and that is how we can tell how old a tree is, by how many rings it has. As the tree grows, all the tubes in the center become hard and they die, and it's the hardened center that becomes the wood. This wood is strong, but also elastic, so that in a windstorm, the tree will sway and not break. The vital tubes that are on the inside of the bark are two kinds. One sends water up to the leaves, and the other carries food down to the rest of the plant from the leaves. Tubes that carry food are found just inside the bark, and we call them phloem. This comes from the Greek word phlos, which means bark. The other tubes are called xylem, and this also comes from a Greek word, xylon, which means wood. Xylem tubes are found in the innermost part, close to the wood, and carry water from the roots to the leaves. Remember, the phloem carries the food from the leaves to the root. The xylem tubes are protected by its innermost position. If an animal eats the stem of the plant, it will eat the phloem, leaving the xylem untouched so that the plant can continue making food from the water carried up from the roots. If the xylem is eaten, then the plant has no way to make its food. In between the phloem and the xylem, there is a little area called the cambium. Cambium comes from the Latin word cambiare, which means to exchange. The tissue of the cambium can become either wood or bark. These are the three things that make up the living part of a woody stem: the xylem, the phloem, and the cambium. These tubes are microscopic, so we can't actually see them. If you looked through a microscope, like this picture, you could see these little tubes.
And now, the herbaceous monocot versus herbaceous dicots versus woody stem. What is herbaceous monocot stem? Herbaceous monocot stem, all plants begin their development as herbaceous or non-woody organisms. In herbaceous monocot stem, the vascular bundles are scattered. Moreover, monocot stems do not have cambium. In addition, distinct area of pith and cortex are absent in monocot stems. Secondary vascular tissues production is also not seen in herbaceous monocot stem. In vascular bundles, xylem is located closer to the center of the stem, while phloem is located closer to the surface. What are herbaceous dicot stem? The vascular bundles of herbaceous dicot stems are arranged in a circle or a ring. In a vascular bundle, both xylem and phloem can be seen. The vascular cambium stem is located in between the xylem and phloem. The center area of herbaceous dicot stem is the pith, composed of a large, thin-walled parenchyma cells that function primarily for a storage. Moreover, a distinct area of cortex is also found in herbaceous dicot stem. Cortex is a part of the plant's ground tissue stem, containing parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma cells. Herbaceous monocot versus herbaceous dicot stems. In herbaceous monocot stems are the stems of monocot plants having randomly scattered vascular bundles in the cross-section, while in herbaceous dicot stem are the stems of dicot plants having vascular bundles arranged in a ring. In monocot, the vascular cambium is absent, while in herbaceous dicot stems is present. In monocot, it do not have distinct cortex and pith, while in herbaceous dicot stems have distinct areas of cortex and pith. In herbaceous monocot, do not show secondary growth, while in dicot shows secondary growth. In summary, herbaceous monocot stem has vascular bundles randomly distributed throughout the cross-section. In contrast, herbaceous dicot stems have vascular bundles arranged in circles and a cross-section. Thus, this is the key difference between herbaceous monocot and dicot stems. Moreover, monocot stems does not have distinct areas of pith and cortex, while dicot stems have a cortex and a pith. Also, dicot stems have a vascular cambium and show secondary growth. However, vascular cambium is absent in monocot stems, and they do not show secondary growth. So this is the end of the discussion of the difference between herbaceous monocot and dicot stem. And right now, let's watch this video.
There are similarities when comparing the stems of monocots, that would be the group which includes grasses and lilies, and dicots, which include the majority of flowering plants. In both stems, ground tissue composes the majority of the structure, surrounded by the external epidermis. In both, there are vascular bundles where the xylem transports water and the phloem transports sugar, and the clusters of phloem sieve cells are located near the clusters of the xylem vessels. The differences are that in a monocot, these vascular bundles are scattered throughout the stem, while in dicots they form a ring. This ordered structure in dicots allows the parenchyma and pericycle between the xylem and phloem to fuse and thus form a continuous layer all around the stem known as the vascular cambium. This is a lateral meristem, which then allows more lateral growth or secondary growth. In a woody tree, almost the entire trunk is composed of secondary growth produced from the vascular cambium. Only dicots produce this vascular cambium allowing secondary growth.
Woody and herbaceous plants are two types of plants divided on the basis of wood they produce. Woody plants produce a hard woody stem above the ground, whereas herbaceous plants produce a soft, flexible green stems above the ground. Woody plants have stems that live for several years, adding new growth, the height, and the width each year. Woody plants may be classified as trees, shrubs, or vines, and may have evergreen, semi-evergreen, and deciduous leaves, while herbaceous plants have stems that die back to the ground each year. In conclusion, the woody plants have a strong stem made up of wood, while the stem of herbaceous plant is flexible. The woody plants are perennials that grow in every season. On the other hand, herbaceous plants can be perennial, annuals, or biennials. The main difference between woody and herbaceous plant is the feature of their stem. First is the bulbs. Bulbs are underground buds with a stem reduced to a small knob on which fleshy storage leaves are clustered. Example of that is the dry onion. Next is the tubers that are fleshy underground stem modified to store starch, like the potatoes. The eyes are the nodes with an axillary bud in each. Next is the rhizomes, that are horizontal underground stems with nodes, internodes, dry scale leaves, and adventitious roots. Example of that is the fresh ginger roots that sold in the grocery stores are rhizomes. Next is the corms that are upright underground fleshy stem covered by leaves reduced to dry and covering scales. Note that corms store reserve food in stem tissue and bulbs in leaf tissue. Thorns are woody, sharply pointed branch stems. Example of that is the honey leucus. And we also have the spines that are small and branch, sharp ungrowths of leaf tissue in which the parenchyma is replaced by sclerenchyma. We also have the prickles that are small pointed outgrowths from the epidermis or cortex of the stem. The stolons, sometimes called runners, that are thin above ground, horizontal stem of indeterminate growth and long internodes that grow out from a parent plant of produce young plants at their tips. Example of that is the strawberry plant and a host of the moss. The next one is the cladophyll, that are flattened main stems that are resemble leaves. Example of the cladophylls are orchids. It is edible. Asparagus shoots left to grow produce many small fern like cladophylls. The next one is the stipules, that are paired scales, glands or leaf-like structure at the base of the petiole formed from leaf or stem tissue. Bracts are modified leaves at the base of flowers. Flower stalks, some are highly colored and resemble petals that surround the small yellow flowers. The next one is the tendrils, that can be exclusively leaf tissues. Example of that is the cucumber leaves that wind and aid supporting the shoots, or they can be modified special shoots with thin modified stems like the morning glories, grapes, and Boston ivy.